A man sat locked inside a small room without any clothes, surrounded only by magazines and a tiny bathroom. You see, he had signed up for a game show that required him to survive entirely on what he won from entering sweepstakes in magazines, whether it was food, supplies, or clothing, until he reached yen worth of prizes. He often ate dog food and rice that he had to cook without proper utensils because it was all he would win. He also couldn't wear any clothing he won because he always won women's clothes that were too small for him. He didn't win a toothbrush until 3 months in, and when he won a TV, he could only watch static since he hadn't won an antenna, and he didn't win toilet paper until he was 10 months into the challenge. He also won a PlayStation around this time, which was his only form of entertainment in almost a year, and at one point, he thought he had already reached the yen, only for the producers to change which prizes counted just to extend the challenge. They did this multiple times. He was being broadcast every week to millions of viewers, but unbeknownst to him, he was also being live streamed 24/7. He had to endure complete isolation for a year and 3 months until he finally reached his goal, when he was blindfolded and taken to what he thought was a new room, only to discover a live audience laughing at him. The ship's cook was sitting in the bathroom toilet when all of a sudden, rough waves made the boat capsize and start sinking into the ocean. He tried to open the metal door to escape, but the pressure was so strong it instead pushed him into another bathroom. And before he knew it, he found himself trapped 100 feet deep in total darkness with no escape. Almost a day had passed, and he had already started to freeze, so he blindly swam around the cabins and gathered tools to make a makeshift raft to sit on top of. For 3 days, all he had to eat was a tin of sardines and a can of cola he had found while building his raft, and at one point, crayfish began biting at him in the dark, as if he were already a corpse. But when rescue divers came to recover the bodies from the wreckage, one of them saw what he thought was just another lifeless body, until it suddenly grabbed him. The cook was alive, and he was the only survivor of the 12-man crew. When he was just 2 years old, the British boy could recall a past life on a tiny, remote Scottish island. He described living in a white house with 3 bathrooms overlooking the sea, a black and white dog, and even his father's name. His family had never been there, and he couldn't possibly have known any of it, since he always watched TV with his mom, and she couldn't recall watching anything about that. But when researchers took him to the island, they found out that the house did exist, and at one point, a family with the same last name as his father's and a black and white dog did live there. He even mentioned planes landing on the beach, which is something that actually happens at the island's beach airport. The boy seemed at peace when he was there. He easily found all 3 bathrooms in the now abandoned house, and could even tell what had changed. Some say it was a coincidence, or something he'd learned subconsciously, but it remains a mystery. David Vetter was no ordinary boy. He was born with a rare condition that left him without an immune system, which meant even the smallest germ in the air could be deadly. To keep him safe, doctors built a sealed plastic chamber where he spent most of his life. Inside, he had toys, a bed, even a TV, all sterilized, but he could never hug his mom or touch the outside world. Any physical contact he had was through the gloves attached to the chamber. NASA even built him a special suit so he could walk and play outside, but he only used it 6 times. A bone marrow transplant gave him hope of living like a normal boy, but hidden inside the donor's marrow was an undetected virus, and with no way to defend it, the virus spread quickly, causing hundreds of tumors. He spent his last days with family outside the bubble, finally free for the first time. He passed away at just 12 years old. As soldiers fought across the battlefield, a massive 200-pound bear marched by their side, standing out as their most powerful soldier. You see, a group of Polish soldiers had rescued him as a tiny cub and raised him as one of their own. He drank milk from a vodka bottle, slept in their tents, wrestled with them, saluted when greeted, marched alongside them on his hind legs, drank beer, and even smoked and ate cigarettes. But when the army moved to a new front, animals weren't allowed on board, so they had to officially enlist him as a private, with a serial number and a salary just to bring him in. On the battlefield, he carried crates of artillery shells that would normally take 4 men to lift. They didn't even teach him that. He just liked to copy what they were doing. The Allies would win the battle that day. This earned him a promotion from private to corporal. And after the war, he retired to a zoo, visited by the soldiers who had fought beside him. A man was pulled over by police one night, but when he was asked to take a breathalyzer test, his reading came back at a life-threatening 0.91% blood alcohol level, over 4 times Belgium's legal limit of 0.22. But there was one problem. The man hadn't had a drop of alcohol, and as impossible as it sounded, he was telling the truth. The officers didn't hesitate to arrest him, since it seemed he was drunk behind the wheel. Not only that, but he had his license suspended for the same offense a few years earlier. This time, however, doctors began to look closer. They discovered he suffered from a rare condition called Otto Brewery syndrome. His gut was full of special bacteria that were literally turning carbs like bread and rice into alcohol, enough to intoxicate him without a single drink. After the charges were dropped, he went on a low-carb diet to prevent his gut from making any more booze. A man was tired of being broke, so he set out on a quest to trade a single paperclip for bigger and better things until he traded something for a house. He started by trading the paperclip for a fish-shaped pen. He flipped the pen for a hand-sculpted doorknob, swapped the doorknob for a camping stove, and traded the stove for a generator. He then traded the generator for a rare neon sign with a keg, which he swapped for a snowmobile. He traded the snowmobile for a trip to British Columbia, the trip for a cube van, and the van for a music recording contract. He swapped the contract for a year's rent in Arizona, the rent for an afternoon with a famous singer, and he traded that for a rare motorized snow globe. He then traded the snow globe to a collector for a role in a Hollywood movie, and finally, he traded the movie role for a 2-story farmhouse. As people were trick-or-treating, clowns began appearing in strange places. They were lurking near forests, standing by schools, and watching from under streetlights at night. It all started with a few eerie photos that appeared online of what seemed to be marketing for a short horror film. But then these images spread like wildfire, and real sightings began popping up everywhere. Reports came from dozens of states, and eventually from other countries. Retailers pulled clown masks from shelves, schools banned clown costumes, and police issued warnings. Even a certain fast food chain decided to keep a certain clown out of the public eye until things calmed down. A few clowns were arrested for making threats, but most of the clowns turned out to be pranksters. An old man with dementia wandered the halls looking for somewhere familiar. He was scared, restless, and confused. He left the nursing home and headed towards a bus stop, but after waiting for a while, no buses showed up. Instead, a nurse calmly came out of the building as if she already knew where the old man had gone. She then brought him back inside, but what he didn't know was that it was all part of their plan. You see, the bus stop led to nowhere. It was a fake bus stop installed to give the elderly a safe place to relax so that instead of running away, they could peacefully sit, thinking a bus was coming to pick them up. And by the time they calmed down, the staff would then know exactly where they would be and guide them back inside gently. Her psychologist poured drain cleaner right into her eyes, and after the burning stopped, she couldn't see anything. But it wasn't an accident. She wanted it to happen, because to her, sight was the problem. You see, she had dreamed of being blind her entire life. In fact, she thought she was meant to be blind. Doctors said her eyes were healthy, but her mind disagreed because she had a rare condition that makes someone's brain refuse to accept a part of its own body. Most people with it feel like their limbs don't belong to them, but she felt that way about her vision. She would pretend to be blind for years, using dark glasses, walking with a cane, and even learning Braille, but at one point, she felt like she didn't have a choice but to make herself blind. The cat would walk up to a patient's bed, jump onto their chest, and quietly curl up beside them. Hours later, that person would pass away. You see, this wasn't just any ordinary cat. This was Oscar, a therapy cat at a nursing home with a special ability. For reasons no one fully understands, Oscar seemed to know when someone was about to pass away. If someone still had time, Oscar would just sniff around and leave. But if he decided to stay by your side, they knew it was over for them. And it wasn't just a one-off thing. He did it again and again, accurately predicting more than 50 passings. Some people think he could smell chemical changes in the body right before passing away, but no one really knows how he did it. The woman was giving birth to twins, and everything seemed to be going well. The babies arrived healthy, looked like any other pair of twins, and there was nothing that raised anyone's suspicions. But when the family requested DNA testing out of curiosity and routine paperwork, the results were not what they expected. The test showed that although the twins shared the same mother, they didn't share the same father. Each child carried different genetic signatures. This meant that the woman had released 2 separate eggs in the same reproductive cycle, but each had been fertilized by sperm from a different man, so biologically, they were half-siblings that happened to be born at the same time. A wealthy man who had just passed away left behind one of the strangest requests in history. He promised his entire massive fortune to whichever woman in the city could give birth to the most babies within the next 10 years. It sounded like a prank, but the government confirmed it was legal, kicking off a literal reproduction race. Families began having children as fast as biologically possible, treating childbirth like a factory assembly line just to claim the prize. By the time the 10 years were up, 4 different women had tied for first place, each giving birth to 9 babies. They eventually had to split the fortune, with each mother walking away with the equivalent of $2.5 million today. The girl picked up a bat to carry it outside the church, but it bit her finger, leaving a mark so small she just washed it and went about her day. Weeks later, she fell dangerously ill, but by the time doctors realized it was rabies, it was too late for the vaccine. Up to that point, rabies was 100% fatal once symptoms began. But one doctor didn't give up, so he tried an experimental treatment. By putting her in a coma, her rabies-infested brain went to sleep, which gave her immune system a chance to fight. 2 weeks later, she woke up, and a few months of therapy after that, she became the first person ever to survive rabies without the vaccine. They would take a stray dog from the streets and train her to remain calm in a tiny capsule while handling the intense shaking and noise of a rocket launch. Once she was ready, she was strapped to a rocket and sent away to space to become the first living creature to circle the Earth. But as the world celebrated her achievement, some people back home were not so excited. You see, the engineers in charge of the mission only had less than 4 weeks to design and build the spacecraft. So by the time of the launch, they still hadn't figured out a way to bring her back down. They just launched her knowing they were never gonna see her again, since all they wanted to test was whether life could survive in space or not. They passed a law that allowed parents to put children of any age younger than 18 up for adoption without facing any legal repercussions. You see, the law was meant for newborns, but its vague wording made it seem like the age limit was 18. So within months, more than 35 children and teenagers, many over 10, and some even as old as 17, were dropped off at hospitals. Not only that, but parents came from all over the country, crossing state lines just to use the loophole. And one father even dropped off 9 of his 10 children because raising so many overwhelmed him. The law was active for 4 months before they changed the age limit to 30 days. Minutes after you died, they would place you inside a steel tank filled with liquid nitrogen, freezing your body colder than the surface of Pluto. Doctors use chemicals that turn your body into something closer to glass than ice. You see, some people hope that one day, centuries from now, medicine and technology will be advanced enough to cure whatever illness killed them and bring them back to life. It might sound like science fiction, but people today are paying hundreds of thousands of dollars to be put in these time capsules, and some pay just $80,000 to preserve only their head so that they can be put in a new body. He would inject his patients with a substance that would slowly stop their hearts, but the moment they flatlined, he would quickly work to bring them back. You see, he actually did this on purpose. He would wait until the other nurses left the room to set off a cardiac arrest in patients who were passed out in the ICU, just so he could rush into the room later, perform CPR, and save them in front of his colleagues. He was desperate to look like a hero, but these rescue stunts failed potentially over 300 times because the dose was often too much for the patients to handle. He was caught when another nurse watched him injecting the juice into a healthy patient, and he was finally sent to prison for life. A giant sunfish at an aquarium suddenly stopped eating for seemingly no reason. It just floated around, rubbing against the glass like something was wrong. The staff checked if it was sick, but found nothing. That's until one of them noticed something strange. The sunfish only started acting like this after the aquarium closed for renovations, when no one was coming to see it anymore. This meant it wasn't sick, it was just lonely. So the staff printed photos of people's faces, stuck them on uniforms, and placed them in front of the tank. The next day, the sunfish started waving its fins like it was happy to see them, and eating like never before.